Hi, welcome to Trail Talk. I'm your host, Mike Morrison, and today we're going to be talking about some of the trails outside of Milford. For those who may not know, the Upper Charles Trail, which runs through Milford, is actually intended to be a 25-mile loop running through 5 towns in Massachusetts. So here today to talk with me more about some of the trail development outside of Milford is Robert Weidknecht, the chair of the Holliston Trails Committee. Robert, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I know that Holliston has been really gung-ho about getting the trail developed and through their town. So let's start with talking about a history of the Upper Charles Trail through Holliston.
Well, it's funny, the idea of the trail actually started in Holliston, before the Upper Charles Trail was conceived. Back in the 80s, it was well before I moved into town, but the Conservation Commission had known about the section of the rail bed that had been abandoned, and it was only a 2-mile section at that time.
Yeah.
And so they had the idea, why don't we convert this to a multi-use trail? And so it went from there, and later on I worked for an engineering company, Beals & Thomas, and the head of that, the president, was John Thomas, and he had the idea, why don't we connect this with there are 3 corridors that make up the rail bed for the various 5 towns that are involved. And so he came, had some time. It was back when the market was bad and had plenty of time on his hands. And so he then came up with the idea of connecting them all. And so he went around to meet with the various towns. And so it blossomed from there. And so, we've been working on our 6.7 miles in Holliston, and Milford beat us to it. And you got yours all constructed before we were able to, finish 2 miles of ours.
Right, but any mileage we can add on to it just improves so much more with the trail. It makes it so much more functional.
Yeah,
Instead of just riding through one town, you can go from here to downtown essentially in Holliston.
Yeah. It works as a regional trail. I've been out on the trail and I see people who park at the Milford hotels there, and they'll come in and they're looking for riding longer distances, and it helps to have not only the 6.5 miles in Milford but connect to Holliston's. We have about 4 miles to get to the center of town, and so now that we're connected, that really brings in people.
Right. So I think we have a map here as well we can take a look at. On the map here, the bolded area is the town of Holliston.
Correct, in the center, yeah.
Right. And the Milford Trail ends right about there, if I remember right.
Yeah, the green is all the Milford's Trail, which is, 6.5 miles?
6.7.
6.7 miles, fully built, right up to the Holliston border. And so this is the town of Holliston relative to that. Sherborne, Framingham, Ashland, Hopkinton, Milford, and Holliston.
Okay. And so currently, much of the development in Holliston has been focused on connecting it from the town of Milford all the way up through the center of town.
Yeah, the first section that we built was actually a piece, it was sort of by itself over by Hopping Brook Industrial Park to South Street.
Okay.
And then little by little, as things progressed, it took us a long time to get the actual property from CSX, the railroad company.
Yeah.
And then somebody, the Leonhard Foundation, donated a piece that connects us to Milford. And so as soon as we were able to get that parcel, we made that connection to the Milford Trail.
So it seems like getting all the pieces together has been one of the real challenges in building this trail.
Yeah, that's the key component is to acquire the ownership. And for a long time, it was owned by a different railroad company, and then when CSX took it over, they didn't want to talk to us for a number of years, and so it took us 13 years to finally get them to sell the land to us. And now they're eager to sell all of it. We just didn't have enough money, and so we're now pursuing. We currently own all the pieces from the Milford town line all the way to the center of Holliston, right there by Casey's.
Okay.
We are pursuing. Currently, we have a transportation bond bill to buy the piece that's shown in magenta here, running from the center of Holliston all the way to the Sherborne town line. And so that we hope to close on by the end of this year.
Okay, very good to hear that trail development is moving forward.
Right.
I know that this was essentially the active rail line through town up until about the 1960s or so?
Well, it was actually 1958 was the last passenger train,
okay.
and then I think it was about. I had moved into town, and the freight trains were still coming to Cross Street, roughly where the Winnicketing Woods is. I'm sorry, so it's right about at that location. That was actively used for freight. Not very often, but they still had trains coming in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
But this piece had been abandoned, and that's why I had mentioned back in the 70s it had been abandoned, and in the 80s the Conservation Commission was contemplating converting this first 2-mile piece to a rail trail at that time.
That's the Mass State Conservation Commission, is it?
Oh, no, the Town of Holliston Conservation Commission is part of their open space and recreation planning.
Okay.
They had identified that as a key acquisition to make it a multi-use trail.
So this is a real rails to trail project, digging up the old rail bed, getting the ties out. Yeah. So let's see. So have there been any other challenges that you faced in terms of developing the trail from what it is now to, or sorry, I should say what it was when you first started with the project to now?
Well, funding is always an issue.
Yes.
And so when we started this, we actually obtained the funding through the Transportation Improvement Program, which is what Milford had used to design and build its paved trail.
Right.
We actually had that funding in place.
Okay.
And then because it took us so long dealing with CSX for that many years, we got bumped off the tip. And so we said, well, since we're no longer have that construction funding available, we then said, well, we'll go a different route. And so that's we're going with a recreational trails program, which is a stone dust surface, and building it less expensive, but it's not as durable surface and that sort of thing. So we're using a different funding source, and that's why we're developing it in smaller sections. You only have a certain amount of money that's available. So the funding, first, the hurdle was getting the land itself, and now the second hurdle is the construction funding. And so we're finding now that we're able to secure the money, and we get a lot of volunteer help. Not only volunteer labor, but we're also getting a lot of like the highway department. Milford actually had donated some material because we actually constructed a piece in Milford from the Holliston town line to the ending of the section that you had seen circle.
Right.
And we were planning on paying for it and installing it all, and your Milford Highway was able to secure some reclaimed asphalt, and then they ended up paving it.
Laying it down. Very nice.
That saved us money, which now allows us to build more in this section that we're currently working on.
It is very nice. I remember the first time the connection from the Milford turnaround there on the Milford Trail at Zane Circle to the Holliston Trail was just like a 3-foot gap in the fence. And then you go over a rocky, basically mountain biking at that point.
Steep rocky slope there. Yeah.
Now
it's nice and smooth going straight up.
You just go around the granite marker and then there you are. Right. It's like a little difference.
Yep.
So you said the finished trail surface is going to be stone dust?
In Holliston, we're going to be using the stone dust only because of the funding sources.
Exactly.
And it's a lot faster for us to be able to get it designed, permitted, and approved. When you go through the Mass DOT process, you have to go through the 25%, 75% design process. And so we are actually going through and self-designing it, self-permitting it, volunteers to do all that, and then hiring contractors to put down the surface itself.
Very nice, very nice. And I recall that the stone dust surface is largely up in pieces because that's the way that it's been constructed.
Yeah, what is
far.
shown in magenta is actually all stone dust, and so there's a section 1.3 miles that runs from the center of town to Cross Street, and then this is all in construction, various stages. New bridges and that sort of thing have been going in, and then this section again from Hoppingbrook Road to the Milford line, or to the Milford Trail actually, is stone dust.
I think I can speak for everybody who uses the trail regularly. They're eagerly waiting the finished surface.
For the rest of it.
Yes.
We hope to have stone dust surface completed from the center of town all the way to Milford by the end of this year.
In 2015?
Yes.
Very nice. Well, that's excellent news. And you know, one of the challenges of developing a rail trail is that it's a rail bed, so fairly level, maybe some curvature to it for drainage. But one of the sections that I remember most was an old railroad bridge, which was very narrow, stone, granite, whatever they had at the time. And all the railroad ties were gone, but it was still a very uneven surface, narrow, and absolutely no side rails.
No handrails,
no
right.
nothing. So with a strong gust of wind, and there you go. Thankfully, it didn't happen, but you never know.
Right.
And so I remember riding down the trails recently that it's been replaced.
Yes, Solect has a solar farm right adjacent to the rail bed, just near Hopping Brook Industrial Park. And so they have actually done the construction for, it's roughly a half-mile segment of the trail. They've reoriented the crossing at Hopping Brook Road because it was at a location the sight distance wasn't very good, just the way the railroad geometrically aligned with Hopping Brook Road.
Yep.
And so we had them relocate the intersection for better sight distance. They built like a half-a-mile trail and then also built the bridge. And they're also generously providing a parking area for us. And so we'll have,
nice.
I think it's 30-car parking lot
Nice.
as soon as you drive in from Hopping Brook Road. It's not open to the public yet, but it's all graded out, almost ready to go.
It will be.
Hopefully by the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah. That's very welcome news too, because I know along much of the trail in Holliston there's not terribly much.
Yeah.
I think there's some, Zane Circle is private parking, so you can't park there, but I think in Milford, closer to the Beaver Street area, was the closest parking you could probably get.
We have a number of parking areas along the way that are outlined on the map, but you know, some of them are fairly small, and this 30-car parking lot that Select is building will be a great benefit to us.
I would say.
Right.
And another issue that is frequently coming up is the trail crossings, because inevitably you'll have to cross a busy road. You can't tunnel under it, go over it or anything.
Right.
So what are the plans for crossing? Not every road is as busy, some are more than others, but what are the general plans for handling that?
It varies in different sections. Obviously the busiest section is the piece that runs 126, which is called Summer Street.
Yes.
And that one, we have got the funding for that, and we're putting in what is called a rapid flashing beacon. Ooh. And that it'll be, you know, a warning light and signage, and it flashes two directions in the southern direction and two lights flashing in a northerly direction on both sides of the street. And so that'll be a very visible way of stopping the traffic when they see people in the crosswalk.
Yeah.
And so that we're planning on putting it there. We have another one that'll go in at Central Street, and then farther on in the future section we'll have another one at Washington Street.
That's Route 16, I believe.
Route 16, northerly, easterly section of Holliston.
Okay. Well, that's great news, because I know even with flashing beacons here in Milford, getting cars to stop has been a continual problem.
Right.
So it was great to hear you doing what you can with that. And another section that's been rather interesting was the Blair Square area. I know that the trail runs through there, and that's largely a wider section.
Yeah,
as opposed to
it was actually a
12
depot
feet.
area historically for the railroad, and so the right-of-way is actually wider there. It's typically about 66 feet wide through most of the corridor, but in that section, and it happens to be in the downtown section of Holliston, it happens to be, I think it's close to 110 feet. And so you have a little bit wider area, and that gives you more opportunity to do something with. And so it is now called Blair Square, and it was largely to the benefit Bobby Blair, who's done a lot for the downtown area. If you see all American Bloom is a contest that the town entered in, and so they do some, a lot of flower plantings and beautification of the downtown area. in order to compete with other towns throughout the United States. Sometimes you go internationally as well, but we're doing it as part of the America in Bloom competition. And so Bobby Blair, took it on his role to make a nice park out of this, and so he, got the troops together, he got the funding together, they put in a gazebo, done all kinds of flower beds, and maintained that area, and so it's really been nice, and it's been snowballing from there because, people are donating picnic tables, bike racks,
I saw those
lighting.
recently.
There have been a number of trees that have been donated, and so it's all volunteers that have put that together.
And it's all the trail right of way as opposed to a park that happens to be next to it. Like
Right. It's part of the right of way, and so it's sort of being treated, and the Holliston Trails Committee is sort of having the Friends of take that over as a separate project to do a master plan for that. And so the Friends of is currently going through that process to get public input and come up with a design for the park itself to be a planned park, because it's very visible downtown area, and it's a node on the trail that people can stop and get something to eat and visit the shops or whatever that are in the downtown area, and it works out well.
They host some events too, if there's put up a tent in or something like that.
Well, they've had the Winter Festival, they've had the Fall Festival, they've had what is called they have had concerts there at Blair Square. They have small events with a guitarist and that sort of thing at the gazebo. The most famous is it just started. This is the second year we just had it. This last January was the Friends of it organized a walk. It's a lantern walk along the trail, and so the scouts will cook hot dogs and heat up some hot apple cider, and then there are fire pits along the way, and people can walk. And it's been a popular event.
String up lights and everything. I believe that's a New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve. Yep.
New Year's Eve. Yep.
Yeah, it's called
every year.
First Night Lantern Walk is the official title for it.
Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get to it myself, but hopefully this year.
Yeah. It's a fun event.
So speaking of the Friends of the Holliston Trails, that's the official Friends organization in Holliston?
Yes, that's a separate group that is now a 501c3 organization, and so they're able to accept donations and that sort of thing, and that's separate from the Trails Committee. This Trails Committee we're planning to acquire the land,
right? And that's
coordinate the
by the
construction.
town.
Yeah, we're appointed by the selectmen.
Okay.
And so the Friends of is a separate group onto itself, and they are doing fundraising, some of the activities like the Blair Square design, and they have a bench program, and so that they've been getting people who want to have a memorial bench along the trail, and so that is in the works.
Unfortunately, we couldn't have a representative from the Friends here today, but
Right,
it sounds like a model very much similar to what was established in Milford, is with the official Trails Committee selected by the town, and a Friends organization made up of volunteers.
Yeah, we've mimicked a lot of the lead that you've provided to us.
leading the torch, carrying the torch forward.
Right.
So that seems like the organization to be a part of if you want to be involved with developing the trail from a Holliston perspective. You want to be a part of that group.
Yeah, with the help with the activities, they do all kinds of fundraising and activities along the trail. Yeah. The Friends of.
Very nice, very nice. And let's see, there is also a very notable bridge along the trail. It's on the section east of what's been accomplished so far. It's the 8-Arch Bridge, as I know it.
Yeah, everyone calls it the 8-Arch Bridge, but the official term, as Massachusetts Historical Commission calls it, is the Bogastrail Brook Viaduct.
Yep.
And it has 8 arches, as you say, and it's made of the Milford pink granite, which is a very beautiful granite material. And in the works as I mentioned, we were trying to acquire that whole section, and then the viaduct itself is sort of just north of or northeast of the center of town. And we hope to have, there's a separate group it's a subgroup to the Friends of. Mary Greendale is very active in trying to fundraise for restoring that bridge and then putting hand railing system on that.
Right.
Obviously, it's a
Make it safe.
30-foot drop, and there's no handrails currently, and so
Yeah, and it's a fairly long bridge.
yes,
So
it's about 300 feet long, so it'll be expensive in terms of hand railing.
Yeah, but it's a very necessary option.
Oh yeah, we have
Yeah,
to. Yeah.
yeah.
Otherwise, we'd have to close it and
Yeah.
force people down to Woodland Street, which would be nice from a view standpoint because you look at the
You can
bridge
get-
from down below, as opposed to being up on top. But
It is a very beautiful bridge. When last time I remember going by there, and it was built for the railroads, of course, to link the railroad that at the time ran down from Framingham through Milford.
to Milford, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It was a passenger train system that went from Framingham to Milford,
Yeah.
as well as for the freight.
Right. Right. So hopefully we get to the point where that becomes a more viable option as opposed to take your life a bit in your hands going over
Going
the
on a
bridge.
street. Oh, okay, yeah, of course.
Yeah, this is a beautiful area. And is it a historical landmark, you said?
It's I forget the terminology for it, but it hasn't been registered as a historic structure, although we have every intention, obviously, to call it that. And we also have the Phipps Tunnel, which is under Highland Street. That's another structure. So both of those structures, I think they call it listed on the Massachusetts Historical Commission's registry, although it's not technically a historic resource, whatever.
Not officially.
Not officially, yeah.
Okay, but for all intents and purposes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you bring up another good point, the Phipps Tunnel. The tunnel itself is actually quite beautiful. If you've ever gone by, it's actually a very nice arched tunnel. But also, the thing I remember most about that was about 3 years ago or so, it was very much swampy.
Yes.
So one of the many, many improvements which we're all thankful for are the improved drainage through there and the improved rail bed. I believe it's now stone dust through there.
Correct.
Am I right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
That was it's a funny situation because the railroad originally built that with some drainage channels and piping through it. And so when we first started the project, it was all flooded out. And so we had to bring in material to raise it up. We actually repaired parts of the pipes that were in it, and that still didn't resolve it because what was happening is that the way the structure is, the groundwater was upwelling in the center of the tunnel, and in the wintertime it would freeze, and we had 2-3 inches of ice. And so we ended up excavating and putting in these perforated drains to wick away the groundwater that was upwelling in that, and that solved everything. And I joked that that's the first time it's been dry since 1846 when it was installed. So, and I'm not kidding. I think it's been wet the whole time.
Yeah, yeah. In winter, fall, spring, it was pretty much not
Soupy,
easy
yeah.
to pass.
Yeah.
Once you got past it, it was okay.
Yeah.
But that particular choke point, not so good.
Well, even to this day, the section leading up, coming from the west, coming from Milford, you could tell that the stone dust is a lot darker and grayer, and it's still the groundwater is coming up in the before you get to the tunnel.
Right.
And so it's noticeably firmer and darker in that area, and so there's still a groundwater issue there, but that one hasn't been a problem.
Oh, that's very
area.
good. That's very
You just
good.
notice it.
So, where does the Trails Committee go from here? We've talked about 2015, and it's probably a bit premature to talk about 2016, but are there any plans you feel comfortable talking about for maybe continuing on the remaining sections?
Yes, well, we have a lot going on right now, and as I mentioned, we're by the end of this year, we hope to have the entire piece from the center of town all the way to Milford totally stone dust.
Right.
By the end of this year, we're going to purchase, right now we're only leasing it, so we're going to purchase the last 2.5 miles. So by the end of this year, we hope to own the entirety of the rail corridor in Holliston.
Okay.
And so then we will apply for the recreational trails grant funding under the DCR program
Okay.
to put in stone dust through that segment. And so what we'll hope to do is then, we won't find out about that until late 2016. And so we wouldn't be able to start on that using that federal funding source. But in the meantime, we've had the benefit, the Holliston Highway Department, when they do a street grinding, they will provide us the material. And so that won't stop us. So once we own it, it'll be easy. You know, we'll be able to do
Improve
bits and
it.
pieces
Yeah.
as we go along. So, you know, if the highway department has some material available, we'll go immediately put it down and as a gravel base, and then wait for the DCR funding to put the stone dust surface on it.
Cut back the overgrowth and...
Yeah, we have a group working tomorrow. Christ the King Lutheran Church will have a group out there tomorrow to
Very
cut.
nice.
They're actually cutting part of that section that
very
we
nice.
lease.
Nice. And so that'll be just even more of it cleared out. It's not quite ready for prime time yet. Don't have anything.
No, the surface is pretty
It's-
bad in that section because it's the stone ballast from the
Yes.
railroad, and it's tough to walk. It's even walking on is hard. you
Yeah,
know,
I know.
those sharp rocks.
It's sharp rocks, if you stumble, it's
Yeah,
not so
yeah.
good. Mountain biking maybe, but even then. But, you know, at least there are plans to continue on and improve the trail and hopefully connect it up with Sherburne at some point.
Yeah, Sherburne actually owns its piece from the Holliston town line
A short
to
section.
Whitney Street. It's a very short section, and so they're in the process of getting it built. It's a developer who's doing a parking area on the western side of the rail bed, and so they'll be building a part of the trail that connects to Holliston. And so I don't know the timing on that, but I've heard that it's in the works.
Oh, that's good.
And then we've also had some discussions with Framingham and to try to connect all the way up to the Framingham T station eventually. But unfortunately,
Longer term plans.
there's active railroad use in parts of it, and so CSX will not allow, obviously, resident or pedestrians on it, whatever.
Right. Well, it's always good to hear that there's longer term plans and works to say that this is what we're doing now and this is what we're planning to do later on. Good to know that there's definitely an overall framework in place. So, well, thanks very much for coming out here.
Well,
it's very welcome to hear that there's so much work going on the trail. There's so many people hard at work, just like yourself, your Trails Committee, and the volunteers.
The volunteers have been unbelievable.
Yeah, can't thank them enough for all their hard work out there. So, well, thanks again for coming out.
All right, well, thank you for having me.
All right.
All right.
Thanks very much. So, thanks for watching. I hope you've heard a lot of great information about the Holliston Trails. I hope you get out there and enjoy the trails very much. Like we just said, it's been the culmination of a lot of hard work by a lot of people, a lot of volunteers as well. So if you get out there, please enjoy it and please be respectful. Don't litter. Be respectful of the neighbors around you. So again, thanks for watching and hope you have fun out there.